celebrated, graduated, made it past fail. Sassy, classy, Kool-Aid with the kale. Duh.
What's going on, people? Welcome to Extended Clips, which is basically going to be the show where I talk more in depth about whatever movie I feel like going more in depth about. So I did see Brave New World for a second time. I saw it in IMAX this time, and I did recognize that I felt a little bit differently about the film. Not a whole lot, just a little bit. And I'm basically going to go from Act 1 to Act 2 to Act 3, so let's kick it off with Act 1, where I really didn't feel that much different. I still like the cast, I still like Sam Wilson, I'm still kind of on the dialogue. I mean, it's pretty apparent right out the gate. The dialogue is really generic and feels very exposition-y. And yeah, I still felt that way with the first act of this movie. Even though a lot of the scenes with the characters, I do like them, I can't help that feeling that I would enjoy it more if the writing was a little more tight. And while I'm never mad at a film starting with an action sequence, you know, the MCU does that often. This was one of those movies that I actually feel like it would have benefited from having more character to start rather than just jumping into an action sequence. I mean, we could have got Sam waking up at his house and getting ready for the day, and maybe see him get on the phone with his sister, or maybe get on the phone with that agent that he's supposed to be friends with. I feel like this movie could have had more meat on the bones, which would have helped me care more about it as we got into Act 2 and Act 3. But it didn't even have to be structured that way. If we're gonna jump right into the action, I could have used the action having more personality. I could have used it being a little bit more unique, but instead, that beginning action sequence, it just feels like a lot of MCU movies, which isn't a bad thing on the surface. I just feel like so many other MCU movies have had such more thrilling beginning action sequences, especially in the Captain America franchise. I understand that this isn't the first Captain America movie, but it is the first Sam Wilson movie. So whether it was a more unique approach to the action or just opening with more character focus, I think Sam Wilson deserved a little bit more than the first act that we got. But hey, all of that stuff aside, I kind of felt the same way about Act 1 that I did the first time. Now with Act 2, but before I get to ragging on the movie, I do want to talk about the Celestial Island fight a little bit more, because I actually found this scene a lot better this time. Maybe it's because I already knew not to expect a whole lot, that I was able to just enjoy whatever I was being given. I also feel like IMAX is a little better with movies that are in this kind of style. I feel like they just visually look more interesting, and I remember seeing Top Gun Maverick in IMAX, and I think I enjoyed that movie in IMAX more than I did in Dolby as well. I do wish that Celestial Island had a little more presence in the story than just pretty much being a backdrop for this scene, because other than this scene, and other than them mentioning that this is where adamantium comes from in the beginning, Celestial Island doesn't really play a role in the story. It's not really, you know, a major plot point, and it just makes me feel like we're gonna go to Eternals to take what was probably top 2 biggest things that happened in that movie, other than Arishem the Judge like summoning these niggas from the earth, and it's really just a wallpaper for Brave New World. I don't know, felt like that could have been executed a little better. I also feel like the dialogue is the weakest in Act 2, when we're just hanging out with Sam and Torres, or even when we first meet the leader. I just feel like the dialogue is just so freaking dry. It doesn't have anything about it that's, you know, sticking in my head or giving me anything to think about or ponder on or even laugh at that much. Unacceptable! And while we're on the scene where we were meeting the leader, yeah, it just was not that compelling to me. The first reason why it wasn't compelling is because of his design. Now, I understand that this design could have worked for a movie that's going a little bit more realistic, a little more grounded, a little more political thrillery. However, it makes no sense that this movie ends with a gigantic Red Hulk that feels completely ripped from a comic book. So if you're gonna have Red Hulk in here, I feel like you should have had the leader look like his comic book design. This is kind of the same issue that Power Rangers movie had, and I like that movie, by the way. I feel like that movie had a good tone that it was going for most of it, being a little more grounded, a little more serious. Then when you bring in Rita Repulsa, who feels like she's pulled right off the show, right out of the straight to DVD movies, it doesn't match up with the rest of the tone. So I feel like the design that they went for with the leader, not only is it bad, but it just tonally clashes with the film, I feel like. The second reason the leader is not compelling is because he just doesn't really feel like much of a character. Think about Samuel Stearns from The Incredible Hulk. When he shows up in that film, he really brings the energy of that story up, because by that point we have been following Bruce and Betty the whole time, and they've been really stoic in the movie. So when we get to Stearns, he just brings so much energy, and he's bouncing off the walls because he's excited about all this Hulk stuff. And I'm not saying he needed to be the exact same way in this movie that he was in the Hulk. I'm just saying that if you're gonna remove all of that personality, you kind of gotta replace it with something. I feel like in the second act, the pace of the movie really suffered. I was not interested in what was going on. I was very bored by the film at that point. Whenever we're doing like hand-to-hand combat, it just feels really sluggish. You could explain this away by saying, oh, Sam Wilson doesn't have the serum, so he's not as fast and doesn't hit as hard as Captain America and Bucky. Yeah, that makes sense, but his fight seems to have never had a problem being thrilling up until this point. So why all of a sudden do these fight scenes feel so dry? A lot of these side characters are just really dull too. I mean, the Ruth character, yeah, I heard about the controversy that was going on with her character and her casting. I'm just not somebody that cares about all that drama. Like, I just don't care about all that stuff. What I do care about is a character just not feeling like a person. And that's how I felt about Ruth. I mean, I just feel like she was just thrown in here. That's the same way I feel about Agent Taylor, even Esposito's character. I will say, before we move on to Act 3, I did really like the Bucky cameo. I just wish the scene had more weight to it, because they don't discuss anything that's discussed in that scene anywhere else in the film. Because Bucky is basically giving Sam this reassurance like, oh, Steve, he gave people something to believe in, but you give people something to aspire to. Yeah, that would work if we had some scenes throughout the film that, gave us that impression. When we get that scene, it really does just kind of feel like it comes out of nowhere. I don't know if there was more to the story that was just cut out, or if that was just what they happened to come up with for Bucky's scene. It just used to feel like these cameos had a little bit more weight to them. And I will say I did enjoy the Bucky cameo more than I enjoyed the Valkyrie cameo in the Marvels, so I'll give them that. But as much credit as I can give this scene, it still ends with your typical generic MCU humor, and I wish you guys would stop doing that. I know humor has worked for the MCU for years, and I would never say that they need to make movies without humor in them. I'm just saying, find better places to put your humor than to bookend more serious and dramatic scenes, because it honestly compromises the scenes more often than not these days. And with that, we get to Act 3, which I actually enjoyed a little bit more this time. The biggest elephant in the room is that a lot of this act is already in the trailers, and I discussed that in my original review as well. I will say though, seeing Red Hulk duke it out with Captain America, it is a cool visual. I'm not gonna say that the scene had no merit. It was definitely probably the most exciting moment in the film. The CGI was mostly good. I did feel like it was kind of at a lot of points. I never thought that Red Hulk looked amazing. It seemed like he just looked pretty good, but especially when I compare him to other looks of the Hulk that we've had in the past, I mean, this is easily the bottom of the list if you ask me. I mean, I personally don't think they've ever designed the Hulk better than they did in the 2008 version with Edward Norton. I mean, I know that's not people's favorite movie, but I've always appreciated that movie, and I always appreciated Hulk's look in that movie. I also felt like the Red Hulk talk no jutsu was kind of lame. I don't know, it just didn't work for me. It felt too much like the sun's getting real low. Like it just felt like that, again, like just too much in this movie just feels way too familiar. And yeah, the movie just kind of ends at that point. I mean, that last scene with Sam talking to Torres is a decent scene, but like I've been saying the whole video, if the movie and the story had more meat on its bones and had more weight to it, then I feel like that last scene would have hit better. I feel like after the hospital scene, we could have got a little short time skip and seen Sam, Isaiah, and Joaquin hanging out. Maybe Joaquin takes them to some kind of Mediterranean restaurant or something like that. Maybe they just, sit down and chat for a little bit. That would have been a nice scene. We could have even had like a scene where, especially after the scene with Bucky and the scene with the hospital, we could have had like a dad and his son walk up to Sam and just be like, yo, my son's really into Captain America now because of you, and he never was before. And that means something to me, man. So I appreciate you doing what you do. Like, that would have at least added something to this movie, man. I guess that's about all I have to say. I mean, I had already recorded this video, but I felt like I was sounding very negative, and I felt like I sounded real frustrated, and I felt like I was taking my frustrations with the MCU as a whole out on this movie, which I don't intend to. You know, Brave New World is not a bad movie at all. It's a decent movie, but I barely like it. If you like this video, then go ahead and click the subscribe button, join the family, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Take it easy.